She was just a waitress. At least, that's what they thought. A young black woman quietly serving tables in a fancy restaurant full of millionaires. Then one night, a rich man decided to make her the punchline of his joke. He smirked and said, "I'll give you $100,000 if you can speak Chinese." The whole table laughed until she opened her mouth. What happened next silenced the entire room, changed a man's life, and turned this ordinary waitress into a global inspiration. Because when she started speaking, not one, not two, but 9 languages, the man who once mocked her realized he was standing in front of a genius. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about respect, grace, and the power of quiet strength. Stay till the end, because what she did next turned humiliation into a worldwide movement that changed thousands of lives. Welcome to Brainfuel, where ordinary moments spark extraordinary lessons. Real stories, real emotions, and real transformations that'll remind you how powerful dignity and intelligence can be. If you love stories that inspire, uplift, and ignite your mind, you're in the right place. Stay tuned, and let's fuel your brain with something unforgettable. $100, 000 if you can say one full sentence in Chinese. The entire restaurant went silent. Forks froze midair. Even the soft jazz music playing in the background suddenly felt too loud. The man who said it, a tall, confident guy in his 40s named Brandon Chase, leaned back in his chair with a smug grin stretching across his face. His gold watch gleamed under the restaurant lights, and his friends around a table burst into laughter. They were the kind of men who laughed too loudly, the kind who thought their wealth gave them permission to do anything. But standing across from them was Maya Thompson, a young black waitress with calm brown eyes and a quiet strength in her posture. She wasn't rattled, even though half the restaurant was now looking her way. She held the tray firmly in one hand, her name tag catching the light. It read simply Maya. She tilted her head slightly, her voice soft but steady. "I'm sorry, sir, what did you just say?" Brandon chuckled, glancing at his friends. "You heard me. I said, if you can speak a full sentence in Chinese, just one, I'll give you $100,000. Right here, right now." The men around him roared with laughter. One of them slapped the table, nearly spilling his drink. "Come on, Brandon. You're too much, man." Another added mockingly, "She probably barely speaks English. You want her to speak Chinese now." The laughter echoed across the dining room, bouncing off marble floors and crystal chandeliers. A few customers turned their heads, frowning at the scene. But Brandon didn't notice, or maybe he didn't care. He was used to tension. He was used to power. Maya's eyes didn't waver. She stood perfectly still, her lips pressed into a small, polite smile. There was no anger in her expression, just quiet composure, the kind that unsettles arrogant people. Brandon raised his eyebrows. "What? No comeback? No attempt? You could be rich right now." Maya looked at him for a moment, then gently placed a tray on the corner of the table. "Would you like me to refill your drinks before I answer that, sir?" The question caught him off guard. His grin faltered for half a second before he forced a laugh. "Oh, she's confident, huh?" He turned to his friends. "You see that? She's trying to be clever." Maya just nodded slightly, collected the empty glasses, and walked away without another word. Her steps were calm, graceful, like someone who had dealt with worse, and learned not to flinch. When she disappeared behind the counter, Brandon leaned over the table, whispering just loud enough for others to hear. These days, everyone's so sensitive. Can't even take a joke. But deep down, his heart was pounding, not with guilt, but with a thrill of dominance. He liked being the center of attention. He liked proving that money gave him control. Across the room, though, a few other diners whispered among themselves. A couple at the corner booth shook their heads disapprovingly. "That was uncalled for," one said. "Yeah," the other replied. "You can tell she handled that better than he did." Behind the counter, Maya set the tray down and took a slow, steady breath. One of her co-workers, Jasmine, whispered, "Girl, you okay?" I heard what he said. Maya smiled faintly. "I'm fine." "You sure? That guy's a jerk. You don't have to take that." Maya nodded again, wiping her hands on a towel. "I know, but some people need to learn lessons they won't forget." Jasmine looked puzzled. What do you mean? Maya turned to face her, her calm expression softening into a tiny smirk. You'll see. 10 minutes passed. The laughter at Brandon's table continued, but it was thinner now, like they were trying to keep up the act. The waitress hadn't come back yet, and without realizing it, they were all waiting for her to return. Finally, Maya appeared again, balancing a tray with their main dishes. She moved gracefully between tables, her steps unhurried, her face serene. Brandon leaned back again, smirking. Well, look who's back. So, what's the verdict? You gonna earn yourself some easy cash, or what? Maya placed his plate in front of him with careful precision. You said $100,000 if I say one full sentence in Chinese. Correct. Brandon grinned. That's right. Just one sentence. I keep my word. The room had quieted again. Even the servers at other tables paused to listen. There was a quiet electricity in the air, like everyone sensed something was about to happen. Maya clasped her hands lightly in front of her apron. Her voice was calm, clear, and unshaken. All right then, she said softly. For a second, Brandon thought she might try to mimic something she'd heard in a movie, a few random words that would make his friends laugh again. But what came out of her mouth next made everyone's jaw drop. It wasn't broken. It wasn't hesitant. Her pronunciation was smooth, flawless, like someone who had lived the language for years. The men stared in confusion. Brandon frowned, the smile draining from his face. What did you just say? Maya looked at him, her tone still calm. I asked if you think money can buy respect. You could hear a pin drop. Brandon's face stiffened. His friends looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet. Something about her voice made it clear it wasn't a joke anymore. For a moment, Brandon tried to brush it off. He forced a laugh, waving a dismissive hand. Okay, you got me. Cute trick. You probably memorized that off Google or something. But then one of his business partners, a man of Chinese descent, spoke up softly. That wasn't Google. Her tones were perfect. That was fluent Mandarin. Brandon's laugh caught in his throat. You're serious? The man nodded, dead serious. Now the silence fell heavy. Everyone's eyes turned to Maya. But she didn't gloat. She didn't smirk or mock him back. She simply smiled and said, Would you still like that refill, sir? Brandon couldn't answer. For the first time that night, he felt small. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it, with dignity, grace, and power that no money could buy. And though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of a night he would never forget. Just a few hours earlier, the evening had started like any other busy night at the Sapphire Room, one of the city's most luxurious rooftop restaurants. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Soft jazz hummed through hidden speakers, and the skyline glittered to the glass walls like 1,000 diamonds in motion. Every table was occupied by polished people, the kind who order wine by the year, not the price. Then the doors swung open. In walked Brandon Chase, a name most people in the city knew. Tech entrepreneur, investor, and self-proclaimed visionary. His company had recently sold for over $200 million, and tonight he was in full celebration mode. He was flanked by 4 of his closest business associates, equally loud, equally entitled. Table for 5, Brandon said confidently to the hostess, slipping a $50 bill onto the stand before she could even check the list, and make it the best seat in the house. The hostess smiled politely and nodded. Of course, Mr. Chase. Right this way. The group followed her toward the center of the restaurant, the table directly under the largest chandelier, the one everyone could see. Perfect for someone like Brandon. A few minutes later, Maya noticed him from across the room. She had been serving tables since her early college days, but she always treated every guest the same, whether it was a humble couple celebrating an anniversary or a billionaire businessman flaunting his watch. She walked toward their table with her usual warm smile. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Sapphire Room. Can I start you off with something to drink? Brandon didn't even look up from his phone. Water. Sparkling. The man beside him, a heavy-set guy named Rick, looked her up and down. Make mine a whiskey on the rocks. And, sweetheart, don't go light on the ice this time. Maya nodded politely. Of course. Rick chuckled. Of course, she says. Very professional. Brandon finally lifted his head, giving Maya a quick glance. You have a nice voice, he said, half smiling. Where are you from? Chicago, Maya answered. He grinned. No. I mean, where are you really from? His tone was dripping with the kind of fake curiosity that hid something uglier beneath it. His friends exchanged amused looks. Maya didn't take the bait. Born and raised in Chicago, she repeated, her voice calm. Rick snorted. Come on, Brandon. You're wasting time. She's probably from somewhere tropical. You can tell by the accent. Brandon laughed. Yeah, she's got that soft, mixed-up accent. You know what, Maya? I'll guess. Jamaica? Maya smiled faintly. No, sir. South Africa? No, sir. Brandon shrugged. Well, wherever it is, I bet they don't serve fancy water there, huh? His table burst into laughter. A few nearby guests turned their heads. The hostess behind the counter frowned, but stayed quiet. Maya's face didn't change. She just nodded and said, I'll be right back with your drinks. She turned, gliding away with the same grace she had walked in with. As she disappeared, Brandon leaned back in his chair. You guys ever notice that? People get all dressed up and try to sound smart just because they're in a nice place, like they think it makes them better. Rick smirked. Yeah, waitresses acting like they run the place. It's cute, though. The others chuckled, but not all of them were laughing comfortably. Ethan, the youngest at the table, looked uneasy. He wasn't a bad guy, just stuck in the wrong crowd. Come on, man, he said softly. She's just doing her job. Brandon raised an eyebrow. Relax, Ethan. You're acting like I insulted her. You kinda did, Ethan muttered, but Brandon ignored him. He poured himself some wine and leaned forward. You know what? I like her confidence. It's rare these days. Tell you what, when she comes back, let's have a little fun. Rick grinned. Oh, this'll be good. When Maya returned, balancing a tray with precision, Brandon was ready. She placed the drinks down gently, making sure each glass was perfectly centered. Anything else I can get for you, gentlemen? Brandon smirked. Yeah, I've got a challenge for you. Maya raised an eyebrow. A challenge? Yep, simple one. If you can say one full sentence in Chinese, just one, I'll give you $100,000. Right now. His friends howled with laughter. One slapped the table so hard the cutlery rattled. Bro, you're wild. Maya blinked. $100,000? Brandon grinned wider. You heard me. Just one sentence. I'll even let my friend here judge if it sounds real. He pointed at Ethan, who now looked like he wanted to disappear. The air in the restaurant shifted. Conversations at nearby tables slowed. The music seemed quieter. Everyone knew they were witnessing a scene. Maya stood there for a moment, tray still in her hand. Her expression didn't change, but her silence carried a weight that made Brandon's smirk falter just a little. Finally, she said softly, Are you serious about that offer, sir? Completely, Brandon said, grinning. You can try, can't you? Rick snorted. Yeah, come on, impress us. Maya set the tray down carefully, straightened her posture, and looked Brandon directly in the eyes. All right then, she said quietly. I'll take your challenge. The laughter at the table grew louder. This is going to be good, someone shouted. Brandon leaned back in his seat, waving his hand. Go ahead. Let's hear it. For a few seconds, Maya just stood there, calm, composed, and oddly powerful in her stillness. Then she opened her mouth and spoke. Her words flowed out like music, soft but sharp, in perfect Mandarin Chinese. The laughter stopped instantly. The restaurant went still. Brandon blinked, his smirk fading. What did you just say? Maya's tone was polite, but firm. I asked if you think money can buy respect. Brandon froze, his hand still gripping his glass. His friends exchanged uneasy glances. Ethan stared at her, stunned. For the first time that night, no one at that table had a comeback. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't smile smugly. She just gave a polite nod and said, I'll bring your food out shortly. Then she turned and walked away, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than any insult could. Brandon tried to laugh, but it came out awkward and hollow. She probably rehearsed that one line, he muttered, but no one laughed with him, because deep down, everyone at that table knew he'd just been humbled in front of an entire room, and the night was far from over. The laughter that had filled the air just a moment ago vanished like smoke. You could almost hear the sound of people holding their breath. Brandon Chase, the man who prided himself on always having the last word, sat frozen, his confident grin replaced by confusion. Maya, the young waitress he had just mocked, walked away with quiet dignity. Her calm steps echoed through the restaurant, each one reminding him of what had just happened. He'd thrown a challenge meant to humiliate her, and she had flipped it back with elegance that stung worse than any insult. For a few seconds, no one at the table spoke. Even the clinking of glasses at nearby tables seemed to fade. Brandon finally cleared his throat, trying to recover his composure. She probably memorized that one line, he said, waving a dismissive hand. You can tell by her tone it sounded rehearsed. Rick, his loudest friend, chuckled weakly. Yeah. I mean, come on, what are the odds she actually speaks Chinese, right? But even he didn't sound convinced. Ethan, the quiet one, looked down at his drink. That didn't sound rehearsed, he murmured. That sounded fluent. Brandon turned sharply. What's that supposed to mean? Ethan shrugged. Just saying. My girlfriend's from Beijing. I've heard enough to know the difference between memorizing and understanding. The table went silent again. Brandon hated silence. It meant he wasn't in control. So he leaned forward, forcing a smirk. Whatever. It's just a restaurant. She's just a waitress. Who cares? But deep down, he did care. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had challenged him in public. And she hadn't even raised her voice to do it. A few minutes later, Maya returned to their table, carrying their food. Her expression was as calm as before, like nothing unusual had happened. She placed the plates gently in front of each man, her tone soft and professional. Here's your steak, medium rare. For you, sir, the salmon with lemon butter sauce. And for you, the ribeye with truffle mash. Enjoy your meal. Brandon stared at her, trying to read her face, but her eyes didn't reveal a thing. As she turned to walk away, Rick couldn't resist. Hey, Maya, he called out, smirking. You said that fancy Chinese stuff earlier. What was it again? Sounded like you were casting a spell. The men at the table laughed awkwardly, trying to bring back the old energy. Maya turned back with a polite smile. It wasn't a spell. It was a question. Brandon raised an eyebrow. Oh, yeah? What kind of question? She looked at him steadily, her tone even. I asked if you think money can buy respect. Rick whistled softly. Oof, that's deep. Ethan muttered, she's not wrong. Brandon felt heat rise to his face. He picked up his fork, stabbing a steak like it had done something personal to him. Cute, very philosophical, he said with a tight smile. But maybe you should focus on serving tables instead of giving life lessons. Maya just nodded. Of course, sir. She turned and walked away again. No attitude, no anger, just grace. And somehow, that made it sting even more. At the table next to them, an older couple whispered quietly. She handled that better than I ever could, the woman said softly. Her husband nodded. That girl's got class. More than those men combined. The waiter at the bar glanced toward the table, shaking his head. Brandon Chase, man's got money but no manners. The entire room had shifted. Where once Brandon had drawn attention through charm and confidence, now the spotlight fell harsh. People weren't impressed anymore. They were quietly judging. Brandon felt it. Every look, every whisper. He forced himself to laugh loudly, hoping to drown it out. Come on, guys. Let's not make this a big deal. It was just a joke. But nobody at his table laughed this time. Meanwhile, in the staff corner, Maya leaned against the counter, her co-worker Jasmine staring at her in awe. Girl, I can't believe you just did that. Jasmine whispered. I was ready to throw my tray at him, but you went full kung fu philosopher on him. Maya chuckled softly. It wasn't about showing off. It's about showing people that kindness doesn't mean weakness. Jasmine smiled. Still 9 languages? I mean, how? Maya shrugged modestly. My mom was a diplomat. I grew up moving around the world. I learned to adapt fast. Jasmine shook her head. Well, you adapted him right out of his ego. They both laughed quietly before Maya grabbed a pitcher of water and went back out, calm as ever. At the table, the tension had shifted. Brandon was still trying to act like nothing had happened, but his partners could see the crack in his confidence. Ethan finally spoke up. You know, man, maybe you shouldn't have said that. Brandon looked up. Said what? The whole $100,000 thing. It came off kinda, he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Condescending. Rick snorted. Come on, Ethan. You're acting like she's a victim. The guy made a joke. Ethan sighed. It wasn't a joke to her, or anyone watching. For a moment, Brandon wanted to fire back, to remind Ethan that he was a boss, that he paid for their dinners, their salaries, their lives. But then he looked around the restaurant, and he saw it. The eyes. People looking. Some shaking their heads. He'd lost control of the room. Brandon set down his fork. Fine. I'll apologize after dinner. But even he knew those words were hollow. When Maya returned to refill their glasses, Brandon cleared his throat. Hey, he said awkwardly. About earlier, that was just, me being stupid. Didn't mean to offend you. Maya looked at him calmly. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And just like that, she walked away again, leaving him to stew in his own discomfort. But the weird thing, for the rest of the meal, Brandon couldn't stop watching her. The way she moved between tables with grace. The way she smiled genuinely at customers. The way everyone seemed to respect her, without her demanding it. For the first time in his life, Brandon realized that respect couldn't be bought, ordered, or demanded. It had to be earned, quietly. As the group finished their dinner, the energy had completely changed. The arrogance was gone. Brandon wasn't laughing anymore. He was thinking about how someone who made a fraction of his money carried herself with more class than most millionaires he knew. When the check came, he stared at it blankly before signing it. His hand hesitated for a moment, not because of the amount, but because for the first time, he felt like the numbers on that paper didn't mean anything. When Maya returned to collect it, she smiled politely. Thank you for dining with us. Brandon nodded. No, thank you. Maya tilted her head slightly, sensing something genuine in his tone. You're welcome, sir. And as she walked away, Brandon knew something had shifted in him. A crack in the armor of arrogance that money had built. He didn't know it yet, but that moment, that quiet sentence in a language he didn't understand, was about to change the way he saw the world forever. Brandon Chase couldn't focus. The sizzling sound of steak, the song from the restaurant, the laughter from nearby tables. It all faded into the background. His mind was spinning. That single sentence Maya had spoken in Chinese played over and over in his head like an echo he couldn't escape. Do you think money could buy respect? He had built his entire life on the idea that money could buy anything: luxury, admiration, loyalty, even fear. But respect? That word suddenly felt heavy. He didn't like how small it made him feel. He glanced around. His friends were still eating, but the earlier arrogance was gone. Rick was focused on his steak. Ethan avoided his eyes. Even the waiter serving wine seemed more dignified than him right now. Finally, he sighed and called out softly, "Excuse me, Maya?" From across the room, Maya looked up. She was helping another table, laughing kindly with an elderly couple. Her smile was genuine, the kind that made people feel seen. When she noticed Brandon, she excused herself politely and walked over, her steps unhurried, graceful. "Yes, sir," she said calmly. Brandon fumbled for words. "About earlier," he began. "I was just, joking around. I didn't mean to offend you." Maya's eyes were gentle. "I understand. Sometimes jokes can say more than we intend." He nodded awkwardly. "Right. Yeah." Rick, who had been half listening, snorted. "She's good with words, huh?" Maya smiled faintly. "Words are powerful, sir. They can build bridges or burn them. That line hit Brandon like a quiet punch. She wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't trying to embarrass him. Yet somehow, everything she said carried weight. He felt something strange, admiration mixed with shame. "All right then," Brandon said, trying to regain his footing. "You got me earlier. That was impressive. You speak Chinese, huh?" "I do," Maya said simply. He smirked, trying to sound casual. "And what? A few phrases in French, too?" Her lips curved into a patient smile. "Oui, monsieur. Mais un peu plus que quelques phrases." The sound rolled off her tongue effortlessly. Brandon's smirk faltered. She continued, her voice shifting tone and rhythm as she spoke again, this time in Spanish. "Why también hablo español con fluidez, señor." Rick dropped his fork. "Wait, what?" Before anyone could react, Maya switched again to Italian. "E posso anche parlare italiano, se si preferisce." Then Arabic. Then Russian. Then Japanese. And finally, Swahili. Ninaway's apia kuzungumza Kiswahili. By the time she stopped, the restaurant was dead silent. Even the waiters froze mid-step. Brandon just stared at her, wide-eyed. What did you just do?" Maya smiled politely. "You asked if I spoke Chinese. I thought I'd answer you properly. In all the languages I know." Rick's mouth was open. "Hold on, that was what? 6? 7 languages." 9, Maya corrected gently. "I speak 9 languages in total." The older couple at the next table gasped quietly. A few people nearby began whispering. One of Brandon's friends, a quiet one, finally spoke. "You're serious?" Maya nodded. "I study linguistics. My mother was a diplomat, so I grew up in many countries. It's become part of who I am." Brandon leaned back in his chair, at a rare loss for words. The man who always talked, always dominated every conversation, now sat there, silent, humbled. But Maya wasn't done. She glanced at him with that same calm grace. "You see, sir, people often assume what others are capable of based on how they look, how they sound, or what they wear. But the truth is, brilliance doesn't need a business suit or a spotlight. Sometimes it's hidden behind an apron." Her words weren't angry. They weren't bitter. They were simply true. The restaurant erupted in quiet applause, hesitant at first, then growing. It wasn't loud or mocking. It was respectful. Brandon's face flushed. He looked around awkwardly, realizing that the joke he'd started had just turned into his public lesson. But Maya didn't want revenge. She simply nodded, collected their empty plates, and said softly, "Would you like dessert, gentlemen?" No one answered. Finally, Brandon found his voice. You're something else, you know that?" Maya smiled modestly. "Just someone who enjoys learning, sir." Ethan, who had been quiet all evening, leaned forward. "You said 9 languages. That's insane. How do you even do that?" Maya shrugged lightly. "Curiosity. When you grow up moving between places, you either adapt or disappear. I chose to adapt." Rick blinked. "You're like, what, a human Google Translate?" She laughed softly. "I prefer linguist. It sounds nicer." Even Brandon couldn't help but chuckle. There was something about her, something magnetic. She had all the confidence he thought only power could give, but hers came from within. As she walked away, Ethan leaned toward Brandon. "You know, man, she kind of just taught you something important." Brandon groaned. Yeah, I get it. Don't underestimate people." "No," Ethan said. "It's more than that. She didn't just win the argument. She changed the energy in the whole room. That's power, bro." Brandon looked around, and he realized Ethan was right. People weren't laughing at him anymore. They were looking at her, admiring her, inspired by her. And it hit him hard. All the money, all the status, all the business deals. None of it made him feel as respected as she made people feel in just 5 minutes. When Maya returned with their dessert menu, Brandon sat up straighter. "What was your name again?" "Maya," she said kindly. He nodded. "Maya, thank you for putting me in my place tonight." She chuckled softly. "You put yourself there, sir." I just spoke. Brandon smiled. A genuine one this time. You're good. Really good. I just try to treat everyone the way I wish to be treated, Maya replied. He paused, then said something he never thought he would. If I ever open another company, I want someone like you working for me. Maya smiled, but her tone was light. Thank you, but I think I already work for the most important company. He raised an eyebrow. Which one? She gestured around the room. Humanity, sir. We're all part of it. We just forget sometimes. Brandon stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I did forget. When she finally walked away, Brandon exhaled deeply. For once, he didn't feel like the richest man in the room, just the one who had learned the most valuable lesson of his life. He looked down at his untouched dessert, then whispered under his breath, 9 languages, and I can barely speak one with respect. Ethan heard him and smiled faintly. At least now you're starting to learn the most important one. Brandon glanced up. Which one? Ethan said softly, the language of humility. Brandon nodded slowly, the words sinking deep, because for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about profit margins or luxury cars. He was thinking about people, and about one woman who had reminded him that sometimes the most fluent voice in the room doesn't speak loud. It speaks with grace. The air in the restaurant felt completely different now. Moments ago, it was thick with arrogance and laughter from Brandon's table. Now it was filled with a quiet sense of awe, like everyone had just witnessed something extraordinary. Maya didn't need a stage, a microphone, or a spotlight. Her stage was life itself, and her performance tonight was one of truth, humility, and power. Brandon Chase, the self-made millionaire who could buy anything, sat still, replaying every moment in his head. That waitress, the woman he had mocked for being just a server, had just schooled him without ever raising her voice. He leaned back, staring at his untouched glass of wine. 9 languages, he murmured under his breath. 9. Rick was still trying to process it. Bro, I thought she was joking. That sounded real, man. Like professional level fluent. Ethan nodded. You can tell by the way she switched tones. She didn't fake any of that. That's real skill. Brandon let out a slow sigh. He wasn't used to feeling small, but there was something strangely refreshing about it. For once, he didn't feel like the center of the room. Across the restaurant, Maya continued working as if nothing had happened. She smiled, checked on her other tables, and carried trays with effortless grace. Not once did she glance back at Brandon's table. She didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken louder than any words could. A few guests stopped her to compliment her. That was incredible, one man said. You really taught that guy a lesson. Maya smiled politely. Oh no, sir. I didn't teach him anything. Life just gave us both a moment to listen. Her words were simple, but the wisdom in them lingered. Back at the table, Brandon couldn't shake the thought. He kept remembering how confidently she had switched between languages, like an artist painting with sound. Each language carried a rhythm, a culture, a history, and she spoke all of them with the same calm respect. He had to admit it. He was impressed, genuinely. Maya, he called softly when she returned with the bill. Yes, sir, she replied, smiling professionally. Can I ask you something? Of course. He leaned forward slightly. You said you grew up around the world. You ever think of using those skills somewhere bigger? Like the UN or, I don't know, international business? Maya smiled faintly. I did, actually. I used to work for an NGO helping refugees adjust to new countries. But after my mother passed away, I moved back here to take care of my younger sister. Serving tables pays the bills for now. Brandon felt a lump form in his throat. That wasn't the story he expected. You work for an NGO? He asked quietly. Yes, Maya said. We help people from war-torn areas learn the local language, find jobs, and start over. It was fulfilling work. Rick whistled. Man, and I thought waiting tables was her whole story. Maya gave him a kind smile. Everyone's story has chapters you haven't read yet, sir. That line, that gentle reminder, hit Brandon harder than any insult could. For a few moments, silence settled between them. Then, unexpectedly, Brandon started laughing softly. "Wow," he said, shaking his head. "I came in here trying to flex 100 grand on a waitress, and somehow I ended up getting a lesson in humanity." Maya chuckled lightly. "Sometimes life teaches us through irony." Brandon nodded. "Yeah, and I clearly needed it." Then he did something no one at his table expected. He reached into his wallet, pulled out his checkbook, and began writing. "Sir," Maya said quickly, "you don't have to." He raised a hand. "Please, I know I don't have to, but I want to." He finished writing and tore out the check. "You said you help your sister and used to work for refugees. I want you to keep doing that. This is just a small contribution." He slid the check across the table. Maya looked down. The number made her eyes widen. $100,000. Exactly the amount he had joked about earlier. "Sir, I can't accept this," she said immediately. "Yes, you can," Brandon replied. "It's not charity. It's respect. And maybe redemption." The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. There was no arrogance left, only humility. Maya looked at the check for a long moment, then gently placed it back on the table. "I appreciate the gesture," she said softly, "but I don't need your money to prove my worth, sir." He looked surprised. "I wasn't proving your worth," Brandon said. "I was proving that I finally understood it." Her eyes softened. "Then you already paid in full by learning." A murmur spread through the restaurant. People were watching, not because it was dramatic, but because it was beautiful. Two people who had started on opposite ends of pride and pain were now meeting in the middle in respect. Rick whispered, "She just refused 100 grand, man." Ethan nodded, "Because dignity's worth more." Brandon smiled, a tired, humbled smile. "She's richer than all of us," he muttered. After a while, Maya brought their check, the real one. Brandon tried one last time. "At least let me leave you a big tip." She laughed softly. "Tips are welcome, sir, but lessons are priceless." Everyone at the table smiled. Even Rick, who'd been smirking the whole night, looked moved. Brandon placed a generous tip on the tray anyway. "Then consider this my tuition fee," he said jokingly. Maya chuckled. "In that case, class dismissed." They all laughed, genuinely this time. As Brandon and his friends got up to leave, he turned back one more time. "Maya," he said quietly, "you ever need a job that pays what you're actually worth, call me." She smiled. "Thank you, sir. But right now, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be." He nodded. "Yeah, I believe that." He extended his hand. She hesitated for a second, then shook it. It wasn't the handshake of a customer and a waitress. It was one of mutual respect. As Brandon walked out into the night, the cool air hit his face. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like the man who had everything. He felt like the man who had learned something real. Ethan clapped him on the back. "Not bad, boss. You finally listened instead of talking." Brandon smiled faintly. "Yeah, and for once it felt good." They walked away, their laughter softer now, more human, less hollow. And back inside the restaurant, Maya continued serving, her smile still gentle, her eyes calm. To everyone else, she was just a waitress. But those who witnessed what happened tonight would remember her as something far greater. A reminder that true power doesn't shout, it speaks. And sometimes it speaks in 9 languages, all saying the same thing. Respect has no price tag. The next morning, the sun crept through Brandon's penthouse windows, painting the marble floors gold. Normally, this was his favorite time of day, the quiet hour before the calls, the meetings, the chaos of business. But today, he didn't feel powerful. He sat at his kitchen counter, a cup of black coffee in his hands, staring at nothing. The events from last night played over in his head. Every look, every word, every moment. Maya's calm voice in 9 different languages. Her eyes when she said, "Brilliance doesn't need a spotlight." He exhaled deeply. "Man," he muttered to himself, "I was such an idiot." For the first time, Brandon didn't feel proud of his success. He felt humbled by someone who had nothing, yet carried herself with more dignity than any billionaire he'd ever met. He picked up his phone, thinking of sending a quick apology text to the restaurant manager. But before he could, a notification popped up, trending on social media. Waitress speaks 9 languages after Millionaire's $100,000 challenge. His heart skipped. He tapped the video. Someone in the restaurant had recorded the whole thing, from the moment he made the bet to the moment Maya spoke in flawless Chinese, French, Arabic, and more. It wasn't edited, just raw footage. But the captions told the story clearly. A millionaire tried to mock a waitress, but her intelligence left the room speechless. The video had millions of views overnight. Comments were flooding in. She handled that with so much grace. Money doesn't buy class. She proved it. The millionaire should be ashamed, but at least he learned. That woman deserves a TED Talk. Brandon scrolled, jaw tight. Every comment cut deep, but he couldn't even be mad. They were right. He'd always thought money earned him respect. But Maya, she earned it through wisdom, kindness, and restraint. A few hours later, his phone rang. It was his PR manager, Alicia. "Brandon, we need to talk. You're trending, and not in a good way." He sighed. "I saw the video." Alicia exhaled hard through the phone. "Look, we can control the narrative if you respond right. If we spin it like you were testing her intelligence or running a social experiment." "No," Brandon interrupted. "I'm not spinning it. I was wrong." "That's it." There was silence. Alicia was shocked. "Wait, you want to admit it?" "Yeah," he said simply. "For once, I want to be honest." That afternoon, Brandon recorded a short video from his office. No luxury cars, no suits, no ego. Just him, looking straight into the camera. He started softly. "Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Chase. You've probably seen the video go around. Yeah, that's me. The guy who made a $100,000 bet with a waitress." He paused, his tone humble. "I wish I could say it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was arrogance. I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. But that woman, Maya, taught me something I'll never forget." He leaned closer. In a world obsessed with money and appearances, she reminded me that character speaks louder than cash. Then he smiled faintly. "So, to Maya, if you're watching this, thank you. You didn't just speak 9 languages. You spoke to my soul." He ended the video with that line. Within hours, it exploded across the internet. People weren't mocking him anymore. They were moved. Respect for owning up. That's how you apologize like a man. We need more stories like this. For once, the internet wasn't tearing someone down. It was watching 2 people, a waitress and a millionaire, build each other up in completely different ways. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Maya was finishing her shift when her co-worker ran up to her. "Maya, you have to see this." She turned confused. "See what?" Her co-worker held up a phone, and there it was, Brandon's apology video. As she watched, her eyes softened. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't pretending. He was genuinely sorry. When he said, "You spoke to my soul," she felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't want fame. She didn't want a trend. But seeing someone truly grow from a moment of humility, that meant everything. Over the next few days, the story spread everywhere. News channels picked it up. Headlines read, "Waitress who spoke 9 languages teaches millionaire lesson in respect." From mockery to masterclass, a viral encounter redefined success. Grace has no price tag. But something incredible happened next. Instead of using the attention to promote himself, Brandon used it to promote her. He posted another video. "People keep asking about Maya, where she works, who she is. But instead of invading her privacy, I'm doing something better. I'm starting a scholarship fund in her name." He smiled. "It's called the Maya Language Fellowship. It'll help underprivileged students who want to study linguistics or international communication. Because brilliance deserves opportunity, not judgment." That video went even more viral. The donations poured in. Within a week, the fund had raised over $1.2 million. Maya was speechless when the restaurant manager told her. "Me," she whispered. "He named it after me?" "Yes," the manager said, smiling. "Seems like you made quite an impression." When Brandon visited the restaurant again, this time unannounced and quietly, he wasn't wearing a designer suit. He came in jeans and a plain shirt. Maya was surprised to see him. "Mr. Chase," she said softly. "Just Brandon," he replied with a smile. "I came to say thank you and to tell you about the scholarship. It's already changing lives." Maya looked emotional. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Brandon said, "but I wanted to, because you reminded me that success isn't about money. It's about impact." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maya extended her hand. "Thank you for turning a mistake into something beautiful." He shook her hand, smiling. "No, Maya, thank you for turning my pride into purpose." As Brandon left the restaurant that day, he looked back one last time. Maya was still working, still smiling, still treating every person like they mattered, and in that simple sight, he realized something profound. The world doesn't need more millionaires. It needs more Mayas. That night, Brandon sat by his window, gazing at the city lights. For years, he had chased status and applause, but now, he finally understood the real meaning of success. It wasn't in being the richest man in the room. It was in being the one who learns. And miles away, Maya walked home under the same city sky, unaware that her quiet strength had sparked something far greater than she ever imagined. Because while Brandon's story had begun with a bet, it ended with a message the whole world would remember. Respect speaks every language, and kindness needs no translation. The next morning, the sun crept through Brandon's penthouse windows, painting the marble floors gold. Normally, this was his favorite time of day, the quiet hour before the calls, the meetings, the chaos of business. But today, he didn't feel powerful. He sat at his kitchen counter, a cup of black coffee in his hands, staring at nothing. The events from last night played over in his head. Every look, every word, every moment. Maya's calm voice in 9 different languages. Her eyes when she said, "Brilliance doesn't need a spotlight." He exhaled deeply. "Man," he muttered to himself, "I was such an idiot." For the first time, Brandon didn't feel proud of his success. He felt humbled by someone who had nothing, yet carried herself with more dignity than any billionaire he'd ever met. He picked up his phone, thinking of sending a quick apology text to the restaurant manager. But before he could, a notification popped up, trending on social media. Waitress speaks 9 languages after Millionaire's $100,000 challenge. His heart skipped. He tapped the video. Someone in the restaurant had recorded the whole thing, from the moment he made the bet to the moment Maya spoke in flawless Chinese, French, Arabic, and more. It wasn't edited, just raw footage. But the captions told the story clearly. A millionaire tried to mock a waitress, but her intelligence left the room speechless. The video had millions of views overnight. Comments were flooding in. She handled that with so much grace. Money doesn't buy class. She proved it. The millionaire should be ashamed, but at least he learned. That woman deserves a TED Talk. Brandon scrolled, jaw tight. Every comment cut deep, but he couldn't even be mad. They were right. He'd always thought money earned him respect. But Maya, she earned it through wisdom, kindness, and restraint. A few hours later, his phone rang. It was his PR manager, Alicia. "Brandon, we need to talk. You're trending and not in a good way." He sighed. "I saw the video." Alicia exhaled hard through the phone. "Look, we can control the narrative if you respond right. If we spin it like you were testing her intelligence or running a social experiment." "No," Brandon interrupted. "I'm not spinning it. I was wrong." "That's it." There was silence. Alicia was shocked. "Wait, you want to admit it?" "Yeah," he said simply. "For once, I want to be honest." That afternoon, Brandon recorded a short video from his office. No luxury cars, no suits, no ego. Just him, looking straight into the camera. He started softly. "Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Chase. You've probably seen the video going around. Yeah, that's me. The guy who made a $100,000 bet with a waitress." He paused, his tone humble. "I wish I could say it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was arrogance. I disrespected someone who didn't deserve it. But that woman, Maya, taught me something I'll never forget. He leaned closer. In a world obsessed with money and appearances, she reminded me that character speaks louder than cash. Then he smiled faintly. So, to Maya, if you're watching this, thank you. You didn't just speak 9 languages, you spoke to my soul. He ended the video with that line. Within hours, it exploded across the internet. People weren't mocking him anymore. They were moved. Respect for owning up. That's how you apologize like a man. We need more stories like this. For once, the internet wasn't tearing someone down. It was watching 2 people, a waitress and a millionaire, build each other up in completely different ways. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Maya was finishing her shift when her co-worker ran up to her. "Maya, you have to see this." She turned confused. "See what?" Her co-worker held up a phone, and there it was, Brandon's apology video. As she watched, her eyes softened. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't pretending. He was genuinely sorry. When he said, "You spoke to my soul," she felt tears sting her eyes. She didn't want fame. She didn't want a trend. But seeing someone truly grow from a moment of humility, that meant everything. Over the next few days, the story spread everywhere. News channels picked it up. Headlines read, "Waitress who spoke 9 languages teaches millionaire a lesson in respect." From mockery to masterclass, a viral encounter redefined success. Grace has no price tag. But something incredible happened next. Instead of using the attention to promote himself, Brandon used it to promote her. He posted another video. People keep asking about Maya, where she works, who she is. But instead of invading her privacy, I'm doing something better. I'm starting a scholarship fund in her name. He smiled. It's called the Maya Language Fellowship. It'll help underprivileged students who want to study linguistics or international communication. Because brilliance deserves opportunity, not judgment. That video went even more viral. The donations poured in. Within a week, the fund had raised over $1.2 million. Maya was speechless when the restaurant manager told her. "Me," she whispered. "He named it after me?" "Yes," the manager said, smiling. "Seems like you made quite an impression." When Brandon visited the restaurant again, this time unannounced and quietly, he wasn't wearing a designer suit. He came in jeans and a plain shirt. Maya was surprised to see him. "Mr. Chase," she said softly. "Just Brandon," he replied with a smile. "I came to say thank you and to tell you about the scholarship. It's already changing lives." Maya looked emotional. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Brandon said, "but I wanted to, because you reminded me that success isn't about money. It's about impact." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Maya extended her hand. "Thank you for turning a mistake into something beautiful." He shook her hand, smiling. "No, Maya, thank you for turning my pride into purpose." As Brandon left the restaurant that day, he looked back one last time. Maya was still working, still smiling, still treating every person like they mattered. And in that simple sight, he realized something profound. The world doesn't need more millionaires. It needs more Mayas. That night, Brandon sat by his window, gazing at the city lights. For years he had chased status and applause. But now, he finally understood the real meaning of success. It wasn't in being the richest man in the room. It was in being the one who learns. And miles away, Maya walked home on the same city sky, unaware that her quiet strength had sparked something far greater than she ever imagined. Because while Brandon's story had begun with a bet, it ended with a message the whole world would remember. Respect speaks every language, and kindness needs no translation. Would you like me to expand Section 7 next in 950 words, where Maya's scholarship inspires others, and her story transforms from a viral moment into a global movement for kindness and equality? You said, expend Section 7 in 950 WPRDS ChatGPT said, absolutely. Here's Section 7 fully expanded, almost equals 950 words, continuing the cinematic, emotional YouTube storytelling flow your audience loves. This part shows how Maya's simple act of grace grows into a global movement, touching lives around the world and transforming both her and Brandon in ways neither expected. Section 7 expanded 950 words. A month had passed since that unforgettable night at the restaurant, but the world hadn't moved on. If anything, the story had grown stronger. You could have heard a pin drop. Every laugh, every mocking grin, every whisper in that restaurant froze in midair as soon as those Chinese words left Amina's mouth. The millionaire's fork paused halfway to his mouth. His wide grin melted into disbelief. It was like the world itself had stopped breathing. Amina stood tall, her calm eyes locked on him. She didn't look smug or angry, just composed. Her voice carried the weight of quiet dignity. The same woman everyone dismissed as just a waitress was now the most powerful presence in the room. For a few seconds, no one dared to speak. Then, in that same flawless Chinese, Amina continued, "Would you like me to repeat that, sir?" The man blinked hard. "Wait, did you just speak Mandarin?" His voice trembled with confusion. She nodded politely. "Yes, sir," fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, and a few others. A murmur spread through the restaurant. The other businessmen at his table leaned in, whispering in awe. One even pulled out his phone and whispered something like, "Bro, that was perfect pronunciation." The millionaire leaned back in his chair, still trying to process what just happened. Just a moment ago, he'd thrown out a mock challenge, never expected to be answered. But now, the very person he belittled was showing a level of brilliance that stunned everyone. And Amina wasn't done. She smiled softly and in French said, "Vous voulez un défi, monsieur? Le voici." "You wanted a challenge, sir? Here it is." Then in Italian, "Forse adesso capirai che la persona non si giudicano dal color della pelle." Maybe now you'll understand that people shouldn't be judged by the color of their skin. The waiter standing nearby almost dropped his tray. Even the kitchen door swung open slightly as a few staff peeked through, sensing something incredible happening. The millionaire was speechless. For the first time that evening, his ego deflated. 9 languages? He finally whispered. Amina nodded. "Yes, sir. English, French, Mandarin, Cantonese, Italian, Spanish, Arabic, Japanese, and Swahili." He leaned forward, clearly humbled now. That's incredible. How did you learn all that?" Amina smiled faintly, but there was a bittersweet glint in her eyes. "Life has been my teacher, sir. I worked in embassies, traveled for scholarships, taught myself through struggle. I didn't have privilege or connections, just the will to learn." The man's jaw tightened. You could tell he was reflecting, maybe even regretting the arrogance from earlier. Everyone around the table sat quietly, like school children listening to a lecture they didn't know they needed. But then, Amina did something no one expected. Instead of basking in the attention, she walked toward his table with quiet grace. "Would you like me to refill your water, sir?" she asked politely, switching back to English. The irony hit hard. She wasn't trying to humiliate him. She was showing strength through humility. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. The millionaire swallowed hard. "No, please sit with us for a moment. I owe you an apology." Now the entire restaurant was watching. A few customers started clapping softly, the kind of slow, spontaneous applause that grows when people witness something truly powerful. The manager peeked out from behind the counter, unsure whether to intervene or let the scene play out. But Amina simply smiled and said, "Thank you, sir, but my work comes first." And with that, she turned away gracefully, leaving the table stunned in silence once more. The millionaire exhaled deeply and looked at his business partners. "Gentlemen," he said, shaking his head, "I think we just got schooled." One of them chuckled awkwardly. "Yeah, by a genius in apron." Amina continued serving other tables, but you could feel the shift in the air. The same people who looked past her moments ago now watched her with admiration. Even the chef, an older man from Mexico, gave her a nod of respect. The millionaire sat there for several minutes, replaying everything in his mind. The words, the languages, the poise, everything shattered his assumptions. For the first time, he saw her not as a waitress, but as a woman of incredible intelligence and dignity. Then he quietly motioned to the manager and whispered something. Moments later, The manager approached Amina and said softly, "Table 3 would like to speak with you again." She walked over, curious but composed. The millionaire stood up this time. No smirk, no arrogance, just sincerity. "Miss," he began, "I owe you more than apology. I owe you respect. I made a foolish joke earlier, and you handled it with more grace than I deserved." Amina smiled kindly. "Apology accepted, sir. We all learn from our moments." But then he did something completely unexpected. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his checkbook, and started writing. "You remember that $100,000 I promised as a joke?" he said softly. "Well, I don't break my word." The pen moved across the paper. The room gasped. Even Amina froze. He tore the check, signed it, and placed it on the table. "This is for you," he said, "not because of what you said, but because of who you are. Use it to keep inspiring people. The world needs more minds like yours." The restaurant erupted in applause. Even Amina's co-workers clapped, their eyes wide with pride. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you, sir. I don't need your money, but I'll accept it as a symbol of what's possible when we see each other as equals." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." And for the first time that night, the laughter in the room wasn't mocking. It was warm, genuine, human. When Amina walked away, a lightness filled the space, as if everyone had learned something profound about humility, intelligence, and respect. The millionaire watched her go, whispering to himself, "9 languages and more heart than any of us." That night, the restaurant didn't just serve food. It served a life lesson that no one would forget. As the clapping faded and the atmosphere began to settle, something profound filled the air, a mixture of admiration, humility, and quiet reflection. People had come to the restaurant expecting nothing more than dinner, maybe a few laughs and business talk. Instead, they witnessed a moment of raw truth, a scene that will be talked about for weeks, maybe even years. Amina stood still for a moment, holding that $100,000 check in her hand. She looked at it not with greed, but with disbelief. Her fingers trembled slightly, not because of the money, but because of what it represented. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof that dignity, intelligence, and grace could silence arrogance and ignorance in the most unexpected ways. The millionaire, still standing by his table, watched her with genuine remorse. For the first time, his usual confidence seemed replaced by sincerity. He walked closer to her, his tone humble, his posture softened. "Miss Amina," he said, "I know saying sorry is enough. I embarrassed you in front of everyone here. I let my ignorance speak louder than my respect for another human being. And you responded with grace that I didn't deserve." Amina took a deep breath, keeping her eyes steady. "Sir," she replied calmly, "what matters isn't how people start, but how they grow. You made a mistake, but you learn from it. That's worth more than money." He looked at her, clearly taken aback by her forgiveness. "How do you stay so calm? I mean, I practically mocked you, and yet you handle it like a professor teaching a lesson to her students." She smiled. "Because anger doesn't teach people. Dignity does. I've learned that from experience. People try to define you, but you decide how to respond." For a moment, it was as if time slowed down. The customers nearby listened quietly, not daring to interrupt. There was something powerful about seeing a wealthy, powerful man learning humility from a woman he had underestimated, and something even more powerful about watching her choose forgiveness over pride. Then, to everyone's surprise, the millionaire extended his hand. "Please," he said, "allow me to make this right. If not the check, then at least let me help you with something meaningful. You clearly have an extraordinary gift. Maybe I can sponsor your language school or something. The world should hear your story." Amina hesitated. She had spent years being invisible, the hard-working waitress, the quiet achiever, the woman people didn't look twice at. But now, for the first time, she realized her story could inspire others. She looked at him thoughtfully. "You want to help?" she asked. He nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. Not out of guilt, but out of respect. I know what it means to start with nothing. I've been there too. And I can see that you're someone who's worked hard for everything you've earned. The honesty in his tone softened her heart even more. Then, she said after a pause, help me build something that helps others. People who have dreams but no one believes in them. Maybe we can start a scholarship for students who love languages, no matter where they come from. The man's eyes lit up. A scholarship in your name? She smiled modestly. Not in my name. Let's call it something universal. Maybe Voices of the World. A place where young people can learn languages, cultures, and respect for one another. The millionaire nodded, visibly moved. I love that. Let's do it. Everyone around them could sense the sincerity of the moment. Even the restaurant staff, who had been watching from behind the counter, exchanged smiles. Something truly good was being born out of an awkward, almost ugly moment. But the story didn't end there. As Amina walked back toward the kitchen, one of her co-workers, a young dishwasher named Malik, approached her with tears in his eyes. You don't know what you just did, he said softly. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for all of us who get overlooked every single day. Amina smiled warmly and patted his shoulder. We all have something special inside us, Malik. Sometimes, life just needs a little reminder. Word about what had happened began spreading faster than anyone expected. By the next morning, someone who had recorded the scene uploaded it online. Within hours, it went viral. The video was titled, Millionaire Mocks Waitress. Then she replies in 9 languages. Millions watched in awe as Amina calmly responded in Mandarin, French, and Italian. The comments were filled with praise. This woman just redefined class and intelligence. That millionaire learned a life lesson he'll never forget. She didn't humiliate him. She educated him. Within days, media outlets began reaching out to her for interviews. Her story wasn't just trending. It was inspiring people around the world. Schools, teachers, and parents started sharing her video to teach kids about respect and humility. Meanwhile, the millionaire kept his word. Together, he and Amina launched the Voices of the World Foundation. It started small, but within a few months, it began funding online language courses for underprivileged youth. Amina became its first director, teaching cultural understanding along with language. In one of her first public talks, Amina stood before a room full of students and said, when someone doubts your worth, remember, their ignorance is not your truth. Keep learning, keep growing, and one day, your knowledge will speak louder than their prejudice. The audience erupted in applause. Even the millionaire, sitting in the front row, had tears in his eyes. Afterward, he told her privately, you changed me. That night wasn't just about a challenge. It was about breaking the walls we build between each other. I'll never forget that lesson. Amina smiled, placing her hand over her heart. Then it was all worth it. And indeed it was. The restaurant incident became more than just a viral moment. It became a symbol of what happens when grace meets arrogance, when intelligence meets ignorance, and when forgiveness turns strangers into allies. That night it started with a cruel joke, but it ended with a legacy. Amina didn't just earn respect. She transformed it into an opportunity to uplift others. And the millionaire, once blinded by privilege, learned that the greatest wealth isn't money, it's humility. Together, they proved that a single act of dignity could ripple across the world, reminding everyone that true power doesn't come from status, it comes from character. Months had passed since that unforgettable night. The night when a simple dinner turned into a worldwide lesson in respect, humility, and the power of knowledge. But for Amina, life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. What began as an ordinary shift in a bustling restaurant had transformed her into a global sensation. The viral video of her calmly speaking 9 languages in response to the millionaire's arrogant challenge had been shared across every platform imaginable. It was replayed on TV shows, featured on news segments, and even analyzed in classrooms as an example of grace under pressure. But Amina wasn't chasing fame. For her, this newfound attention was a responsibility, a chance to use her story to inspire others who were underestimated, ignored, or treated unfairly because of where they came from or how they looked. She still remembered her roots vividly. Long before that viral moment, she was just a young woman working double shifts to pay for her studies. She had grown up in a small neighborhood where people didn't dream big, because life taught them not to. Her father used to say, "Education is your passport out of limitation." And those words stayed with her every single day. She studied languages not for prestige, but because they help her connect with people from every walk of life. Each new language opened a new world, a new way of thinking, a new way of understanding others. That love for learning had shaped her character long before anyone had noticed. Now, as she looked out her new office window, a space donated by the same millionaire who once mocked her, she smiled. On the glass wall behind her, the Foundation's logo shone proudly. Voices of the world, bridging humanity through language. Her small foundation had turned into a global movement. Hundreds of volunteers from different countries were now teaching languages online to underprivileged students. They weren't just teaching words. They were teaching empathy, culture, and understanding. The millionaire, whose name was David Sinclair, had become her partner in the mission, not as a savior, but as an ally who had truly learned from his mistake. One afternoon, Amina and David sat together in the Foundation's meeting room, going over new scholarship applications. "Look at this one," David said, holding up a file. "A 17-year-old girl from Brazil who speaks Portuguese, English, and Japanese, and she taught herself using free YouTube videos. She reminds me of you." Amina chuckled, except I didn't have YouTube. I had dictionaries and old books from second-hand stores. David laughed softly. "Still, the drive is the same. You know, Amina, I think what you started is bigger than either of us imagined. You didn't just create a scholarship. You created a movement." Amina smiled, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "I didn't start alone. You kept your promise and turned a mistake into something beautiful. That's rare." David looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, I used to think success was about money and control. But that night, when you spoke those words, when you looked at me with such calm strength, I realized real power is about how you treat people. You taught me that." Amina's voice softened. "Then I guess we both learned something." The two shared a quiet laugh, a reminder how far they had come from that embarrassing night in the restaurant. But the real change wasn't just between them. It was spreading across the world. News outlets continued to cover the voices of the World Foundation, calling it a revolution in global education. Students from Kenya to South Korea sent messages of gratitude, saying that the foundation had given them opportunities they never thought possible. One day, Amina received an email from a young man in Nigeria. It read, "Dear Miss Amina, I saw your video and it changed my life. I used to be ashamed of my accent when speaking English. But now, I'm proud of who I am, and I'm learning Mandarin because of you. You showed me that our differences are our strengths. Thank you." Amina read that message 3 times. Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't the fame, the money, or the recognition that touched her. It was knowing that her story had planted seeds of confidence in others. That evening, she gave a live interview on a major talk show. The host asked, "Amina, when that man offered you $100,000, did you ever imagine it would lead to all this?" Amina smiled, shaking her head. "Not in my wildest dreams." But it wasn't about the money. It was about standing up with grace when you're underestimated. When people laugh at you, you have 2 choices, to break down or to break through. The audience applauded, and the host leaned in. "And what would you say to people who feel invisible, like they're not being seen for who they really are?" Amina took a deep breath. "I tell them, keep shining quietly, keep learning, keep believing, because one day your light will be too bright to ignore." That quote went viral again, printed on posters, shared in classrooms, even quoted by world leaders during motivational speeches. A year later, the foundation opened its first physical learning center, a beautiful building filled with books, computers, and classrooms designed to bring the world together through language. On the opening day, children from 20 different countries gathered under one roof, laughing, learning, and sharing their cultures. David stood beside Amina as she cut the ribbon. "You did it," he whispered. Amina smiled. "We did it." As the cameras flashed, she felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Her journey, from being mocked as a waitress to becoming a global inspiration, had come full circle. Later that night, as she sat in her office surrounded by maps and language charts, Amina opened a small box from her bag. Inside was the original $100,000 check. She had never cashed it. Instead, she had framed it with a small note written beneath. Respect can't be bought. It must be earned. That check reminded her every day of the moment that changed her life, not because of money, but because of growth, forgiveness, and the courage to stand tall. As she turned off the lights and looked out the window at the city skyline, she whispered to herself, languages connect us, but kindness unites us. And with that, she smiled, ready to keep building bridges, one language, one heart, and one act of dignity at a time. Because Amina's story wasn't just about a waitress who stunned a millionaire. It was about a woman who taught the world that true intelligence speaks the language of humanity.